So, thank you, George. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the agenda?
Yes, Nancy.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, good. Because I did send,
It's Robin Lloyd. Say, I'm on a call right now, starting call on No to NATO through Wilf, and George Friday will have sent you a message.
I'm muted, Robin.
good. So she apparently is calling somebody, inviting them to the meeting. But did everyone see the exchange with Jennifer Bailey, who is the program committee chair? George didn't quite grasp it initially, but I do think we need to add that to the agenda because that speaks to the heart of whether or not those of you who are not part of the Black Liberation Caucus are willing to what sounds to me like defying a position of the national board and Charles Spencer, which is that this working group is somehow out of order. So we do need to discuss that. So George, if you could add Jennifer Bailey email to the agenda. Nancy, could we start with you since Martha Allen is new? Why don't we all start by doing a quick check-in, your name, your different roles in Wilf, and where you're located. So Nancy, could we start with you?
Yes, so this is Nancy Price. I live in Davis, California, and I meet up with the Sacramento branch. I'm also co-chair of the Earth Democracy Issue Committee. I was a board member of WILF in the past and been a member of WILF since 2002, I guess you could say. Currently I happen to be in New Hampshire. So there you are. Thank you. And I guess you'll call on the next person, will you, Teresa?
Yes, thanks for being in the Eastern time zone.
Well, I like the Eastern time zone because I like the, I'm an old Eastern time zone person, actually. I was brought up in the East Coast.
Wow. Julianne, if we could go with you and then Robin and then Martha and then George. So Julianne first.
Good afternoon. My name is Reverend Dr. Julianne Robertson. I am in Silver Spring, Maryland.
And you're a member of the DMV branch, right?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. So Robin Lloyd.
Yeah, hi, I'm, oops, you can hardly see me. There I am. I'm a member of the Burlington, Vermont branch and also part of Ending Mass Incarceration, the death penalty. And I missed a bit of your comments earlier, Teresa, about, because my question is why is it no NATO or no to NATO? I think that's still has to be understood. Okay.
Well, it is on the agenda, but we were overhearing you appearing to call somebody to invite them.
I was calling Pocky. I was trying to get Pocky on the call.
Oh, okay. What did she say?
No, I'm sorry. I just had to leave a message.
Oh, okay. Well, can we go with Martha Allen? Please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Martha Allen from Washington, D.C. We have just formed, with the help of several people here, the DC branch. so that we won't be at large. We have enough members, so pretty soon we'll be on the website. And I'm filling in for Lucy Murphy, who has a conflict and can't be in on this meeting. So she asked, could I do that? And of course, I'm also interested in No NATO.
Well, Martha, were you a member in the previous branch in DC?
When you came, I was at that meeting and that's when I joined.
Oh, wonderful. We're glad to have you. But you live in DC.
Yes, correct.
Great. So George, if you'll introduce yourself and then I'll introduce myself.
Good afternoon. I'm George Friday. I live in Gastonia, North Carolina. I'm part of the Southern Piedmont, North Carolina branch. I also co-convene with Teresa Elamine, the Ending Mass Incarceration Death Penalty Subcommittee of Advancing Human Rights, and the UN Decade of People of African Descent and Reparations Subcommittee. That's it.
Okay, I'm Teresa Elamine. I'm the organizer for the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, which is located in Columbus, Georgia, the home of Fort Benning, where many of you have possibly come down for the demonstrations at the gates of Fort Benning against the School of Americas. And I'm also one of the organizers for the Black Liberation Caucus, which is a point of contention inside of the US section. George Friday and I suggested that the Disarm Committee have a no to NATO subcommittee, which was transformed into a no to NATO working group. We've kind of abbreviated the term to no NATO to make it 2 words instead of a kind of a longer hyphenated phrase, because in our minds, George and I, who initiated this process of educating branches about why NATO is a bad idea, we feel that the reason for us to join the No to NATO movement is that NATO, as a Cold War alliance of countries that are united based on how they will stand with each other in the war effort. And so we think that NATO should not exist. So that leads to the question Robin is asking about what is the difference in my mind and in the mind of George, and we've discussed this at length about why we started this, is that it is to abolish NATO, which is a multi-year campaign. So that's our view about it. So let's hear from other folks. So Robin, since you're unmuted, can we hear from you?
Yeah, okay. No to NATO is a network, mainly, I believe, built in Europe. And apparently, I went to the website. It says if you want to join it, you need to sign the appeal from Stuttgart. I don't know what that's about, but in other words, there is a loose network of something called No to NATO. There is no network that I was able to find titled No NATO. And I just, I mean, on a certain level, to my mind, it doesn't matter, but I think we would be connected with the larger movement if we had the name of the larger movement.
Well, thanks for your opinion. Does anyone else have an opinion about this working group being called No NATO? Because this is simply a working group in the larger movement. Nancy, that's a thumbs up. You're okay with No NATO? unmute yourself, Nancy, so we can hear you.
Very sorry. I meant to put my hand up.
Oh, well, go right ahead, Nancy.
Sorry. There it is, raise hand. I'll just for technical reason. Okay. So I actually do agree with Robin because I spent some time yesterday on internet searching. And I do think the no to NATO 3 words mean exactly what you say in 2, which is we must end NATO. But I do think I would like to see us keep the no to NATO title, I guess, name, because I do think it then connects us without any misunderstanding to the larger movement. And after all, the counter summit in Madrid in mid June was no to NATO. And so anyway, that would be my thinking. So there's no confusion, and that we can ally with other of the peace groups in the US and internationally and try to really build a big international coalition here. We're not going to get rid of NATO very easily. So we better be in coalition with a lot of groups educating and mobilizing. Thank you.
George,
Okay, go ahead, George.
I think there is value in using no NATO. It doesn't preclude us from being in relationship and in coalition with other groups that are working on no NATO, but it also distinguishes that we are coming to this from a perspective of centralizing racial justice, and that we are looking to abolish NATO entirely, so that we don't, there's no equivocation about that, no lack of clarity that NATO has to end. It does not limit us from working with the current coalitions that are affiliated with ending NATO, which we are, or at least I am. I'm part of that, Robin, that no to NATO coalition that you mentioned, but you had to sign the whatever it was. And I have been for a few months. That's it.
Okay, let's hear from others. We want to make sure we hear from everybody on this question. So Julianne, do you have an opinion?
So if I get it correctly, we're discussing whether to entitle the group No NATO or No to NATO, and dissecting the different meanings based on the number of words. Is that correct?
Well, I think we're in agreement that no NATO and no to NATO mean the same thing. We all agree that NATO should be abolished, but there is a larger movement called No to NATO, and that has been rather consistently used for some time. And so this group is actually a group with a 30-month project, because as George pointed out, she and I are part of the No to NATO movement, which includes many organizations and networks and coalitions. But this project of this 30-month campaign to educate branches inside of Will US, I thought no NATO was more meaningful. When we get to the point of the Jennifer Bailey email, maybe we can determine if everyone who is in this group now will continue with this group. And if that's the case, I don't have any strong feelings about doing no-to-NATO as naming this group. But I do recognize that there's a potential that the Disarmed Committee may establish a no to NATO group. And I think this no NATO title distinguishes us as the working group that George and I started. And when we left the disarm committee, Cheryl basically said we had to take our project with us.
Mm.
So this is kind of interrelated to the dynamics inside of the disarm committee, as well as with US as a whole regarding the Black Liberation Caucus. So it is all kind of interwoven, Julianne. We're just trying to get an opinion because I think we're trying to decide today if we're all going to be working together. Because if we're not going to be working together, it really doesn't matter what it's called. Actually, if it ends up being a project of the Black Liberation Caucus. So that's what's in question now. But I understand the position of Nancy and Robin is being connected to the larger movement, saying no, NATO does not disconnect us from the larger movement, but it does distinguish us as a specific project, which is relatively short-term, actually, because at the end of December 2024, the goals that we've established should be accomplished, and branches should be involved in the larger No to NATO movement. That would be what we will be encouraging, and perhaps the disarm committee would get on board because if people notice, Cheryl said, do we mean ending NATO or do we mean just limiting NATO? So there is a difference, in my opinion, between what Cheryl thinks the words mean and what George and I are very clear about, which I think that Robin and Nancy are clear about as well. No NATO and no to NATO means that NATO should not exist. It should be abolished. That is what the movement is saying internationally, that NATO should end. And so Cheryl of the Disarm Committee has a different opinion, is the way I heard it. So that's what we're trying to clarify. What do we mean by no NATO? And we mean the same thing that no to NATO means. But this project is a 30-month project.
Okay, that makes sense. And thank you for taking the time to explain that to me. For me,
okay, so let's hear from Martha.
Well, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. It sounds like it could be either. You know, we'd be able to work with other people. So I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. And I'm not sure, you know, how Lucy Murphy, you know, how she would feel about it, but.
Well, Martha, we're welcoming you to the working group because George and I are willing to work with all of you on this project. But the email, I think you didn't see, Martha, but the sum up of the email is that the National Program Committee chair basically seemed to be saying, and Nancy, since you and Robin were copied on that email, I'd be interested in hearing your interpretation of what you think Jennifer was saying.
Let me see.
For the others, why don't you say so people know what we're talking about?
George, is there any way you could put the content of that email up, or shall I put my second computer
Or just
on?
read it. It's not very long.
I know, but if you read it, you have to really parse it because it is not a very clearly stated, it's not very precisely or clearly stated, in my opinion. And I think if we looked at it, we could parse it better, but I don't have it right in front of me. I meant to put my second computer on.
Well, I could certainly read it if George can put it up. Because last night, Jennifer Bailey, who is a program committee chair on the national board of WILF US, she sent an email to me and George.
I'm gonna put it up.
Wonderful.
Now, you may still need to read it.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you read it, George?
Okay, this is last night. Hold up, I've got to move y'all so I can see it. Last night at 6:31, Teresa and George. Still can't see everything. Sorry. Darn it. I'm working on it, y'all. Okay.
know.
Well, if you could make it
I'm sure
smaller,
our
George.
issue committees, Teresa and George, I'm sure our issue committee's leadership joins me in expressing our gratitude to you.
Well, George, why don't I read it since you can't get it on the screen? Dear Teresa and George, I'm sure our issues.
There it's up.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, George, read it so that everybody can follow along.
Cool. Dear Teresa and George, I'm sure our issues committee's leadership joins me in expressing our gratitude to you both for your contributions to the Disarm End Wars Issue Committee. We recognize your right to continue working on these issues with organizations unrelated to WILF US and its branches. We look forward to your continued program work within WILF US.
Now, the key sentence is, we recognize your right to continue working on these issues with organizations unrelated to WILF US and its branches. That is what is problematic because we're all in branches. And our 30-month plan is all about engaging branches. George, can you show what I wrote back to Jennifer? So what I wrote back to Jennifer is, dear Jennifer, thank you for your email. George and I put a lot into the 30-month plan to educate members and branches about NATO. So I'm making it clear to Jennifer that our work is connected with branches. So her whole thinking that we're doing this work unrelated to WILF US and the branches is really off the mark. And I went on to say to her, we're clear that no NATO means ending NATO as a Cold War alliance that promotes endless war. No NATO is a movement that has the involvement of many organizations, including sections of WILF International. And in my mind, I was thinking of Tamara in Canada in particular. But tomorrow, Wednesday, August 24th, members who have expressed interest in the No NATO working group are invited to discuss how we might work together as members of WILF US on activities proposed in the 30-month plan George and I initiated. So George, you can take this down, but that is the position that I have, and I have not heard back from Jennifer. So it's kind of up to you, Nancy and Robin, to decide if, and Martha, if you want to be a part of something that was basically initiated by members of the Black Liberation Caucus. That's what's before you now. So George, if you could put back up the meeting agenda, because I think we may be at that topic. Well, we're at the point of reviewing the 30-month strategy chart, which Martha has not seen. So in this discussion, we have to decide if we're going to work together across the color line, or if we're going to do what it implies Jennifer is suggesting, that because they really can't tell us in the Black Liberation Caucus what we can do, but maybe they can tell you, Robin, and Nancy and others what you can do. George, you're supposed to be putting up the 30-month strategy chart.
But am I able to join the Black Liberation Caucus?
No.
But if I were in No to NATO, we would be allied in some way to the Black Liberation Caucus, or how does that work?
Well, this is a working group that includes members of the Black Liberation Caucus. It is not necessarily a Black Liberation Caucus project unless all the people of European descent withdraw from it. But what Nancy suggested at our last meeting is for us to find a way that we could work together as a group inside of WILF US that is a diverse group. Nancy, Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I thought you suggested last time.
Yes, thank you. So I did suggest that, and have you folks determined that there's no way that you would bring this project back into Disarm?
Yes,
Well,
that's my question too. I would hope that that could happen.
well, that's not gonna happen. Cheryl and I have had a number of discussions about her style of work, and Ellen and Cheryl have held those positions, in my opinion, for way too long. And it is a committee that does not make it friendly for people who have the level of experience and commitment that George and I have. Cheryl treats us as if we have something to prove. And I don't have anything to prove to Cheryl, because we can do this work without the Disarm Committee. And I've just had enough of their basically white supremacist behavior.
Okay, but just to say that as a, I don't want to belabor this too long, but just to say that as a working group or a committee within Disarm, you would have considerable autonomy. I mean, so I'm just saying that there does not seem to be a mechanism by which there can be a freestanding committee in WILF right now, unless there's an ad hoc committee or some other mechanism of forming an issue committee. Is another kind of process. Just a second, as I gather, it's just another kind of process. So I've been thinking that this topic, of course, is more related to Disarm. If that is not something you see you could work with, and I do know there's been issues with Cheryl and Ellen Thomas, who have certain backgrounds and experience, and you know, we're all learning how to adjust ourselves as we go along in all of this work over these years. So I think that's fair to say. However, I think if we can, because sometimes I'm a little confused by whether this would be then a Black Liberation Caucus project, or is it so how would you describe it then if it's a project of the Black Liberation Caucus open to all members? I think that needs to be very well described, you know, so that it's very open and welcoming and engaging for everybody. And for-
Well,
just
Nancy,
a
if you could-
second, just a second.
yeah,
So-
because you're rambling, Nancy, you're
I'm
rambling,
not-
and we have a 1-hour meeting here.
Okay, just a second, though. In Earth Democracy, our focus is going to be on NATO as a greenhouse gas climate wrecker, so that's going to be sort of our approach. I hope you'll appreciate that so that we can contribute that kind of analysis to, why no to NATO in that regard.
The institutional racism inside of the US section is well known historically. No, you stop, Nancy, because I listened to you, so don't interrupt me, please.
I'm sorry.
Please.
Yes. Thank you.
And so what you and others don't seem to recognize is the democratic rights of members in the US section to form our own caucuses and groups. That is a fundamental question that's being objected to. So it is not unrelated to the fact that we formed a European Descent Allies Caucus as well. At least Robin is a part of that. And so people have to decide whether they want to stand up for recognition, justice, and development for people of African descent, including indigenous people of color, because the Black Liberation Caucus includes all BIPOC. So we have members who are people of color and who are indigenous, who are not of European descent. When we started forming the branches, Nancy and Robin, we realized that we had to create a safe space for all the new members of color that we were bringing in. We never in our wildest dreams thought that Darian would say that we're not a part of WILF, because when we presented ourselves to the Congress in August of 2021, no one objected. As a matter of fact, there was lots of support for it. So the only decision for those of you, because we are probably going to affiliate as a Black Liberation Caucus to WILF International as a group. So the project that we put together is a 30-month project. We will engage the branches in the South and the other branches where there are members of color. See, what Darian has set up is a quagmire for WILF US that makes it look even more racist institutionally than it has been for these whole 107 years. That's what you, Robin, and others have to decide if you want to be a part of that. Because I see us continuing with this 30-month plan, because we have a number of branches that I think would participate based on the goals that we set up. So that's where we are.
Mhm.
So Robin, your hand is up. So would you please speak?
Opposed to the board's decision to not accept the caucus. I think that's wrong. And then, however, talking to Barbara Nielsen phoned me and she said, our bylaws say that there can be no subcommittees or something that have imposed racial discrimination. In other words, the fact that white people cannot join the Black Liberation Caucus indicates that this caucus cannot exist. Now, I mean, frankly, I just think that's bogus. If WILF members want to form a caucus and describe who is welcome to join, they should allow. So I am totally with you on that basis. But withdrawing no to NATO from disarm, I do have trouble with that still.
Well, uh, we're
Can we-
at this, we're at this point, Robin and Nancy. George and I created this 30-month strategy because I think many of the branches, and there are way fewer branches than Wolf US claims, because it takes 10 members to be a branch. And I know that many of these branches, particularly the all-white branches, don't have 10 current or active members. So we have to decide, instead of you, Robin, and others saying to Darian that she needed to stop doing what she's doing. Instead, you have a whole national board that takes a racist position against whether or not members of color have the right to self-organize. I think that Wolf International disagrees with the US section. And so we have approached Wolf International to be a group. Now, the only question for the national board is whether we will be expelled from Wolf US and that we would simply be a group, the Black Liberation Caucus of the Americas, inside of Wolf International. So this is a quagmire and a dilemma that has been created by the racist attitude of Darian and the other people who support the position, which you don't support. So this is a way to clarify the rights of members of color to participate fully. We have started branches. We recruited a lot of new members, and still we're being told that we aren't really legitimate. If white allies won't stand up to that position and demand that the national board withdraw that position, then you have to just decide what side you're on. That's what it comes down to.
Well, I stand up for that. I'll send the national board a note saying that, or try to get, Nancy to say that the Black Liberation Caucus should be allowed as a caucus within Wolf US, as a youth caucus or other kinds of caucuses, one would hope. And I really think they're wrong there. And I hope we can get others to support that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the youth caucus because no one over 35 can belong to the International Youth Caucus.
Exactly, it discriminates.
So it's not a question of discrimination. It's a question of people creating safe spaces for themselves based on an organization that has overwhelmingly elderly white women in the leadership. That is what has been a fundamental crisis that has developed over these 100 years, that culture of the organization has allowed it to decline. So the branches are in decline because the elder members are in decline. And what George and I have been doing is trying to transform that. And I think we've had quite a bit of success in less than 2 years. So I don't want to be disrespected, and I will not tolerate being disrespected because we are building the US section of Wolf. And if people can't see that and stand with us, shame on you. Martha, since you're seeing this chart for the first time, I'll just read the goals so that you're clear about why we exist. We decided that we would identify branches who are interested in learning more about NATO, and we would do that between August of this year and November of this year. And then we're going to be developing packets of resources for educating branches on the goal of NATO going away. So we're going to be able to start rolling this out so that we can get branches. Because I think based on the international movement, there are going to be more and more sections of will and groups around the world who will stand up to say no to NATO. So we want to be engaged with branches to do that. And we identified a number so that we know that our goal would be achieved. So we're trying to get 10 branches to do that, Martha. So we're counting the 4 branches in Georgia and North Carolina that Georgia and I started in the past year or so, as well as a new branch coming on in South Carolina, as well as the DMV branch in DC, and whatever other branches that will sign on. So we do have a plan. And then we're aligned with other organizations, Code Pink, World Beyond War, Peace Action, and United for Peace and Justice, which is a national network. And then we have individuals in the Congress that we've identified that are pushing forward in support of basically the TPNW, but we think that they can make the connection between ending nuclear war and ending weapons, nuclear weapons, and no NATO. So that's kind of how we're thinking strategically. And there are quite a few resources that are listed. And then there are activities that we've already done in some cases and activities that we plan to do. And there is definitely a strong alliance, Martha, with the Black Liberation Caucus because we represent several branches. So we have members in the Greater Philadelphia branch, in the Boston branch, in the Cape Cod branch, and in the branches in the South. So there are enough of us, I think, to carry out this plan. And also the Southern Anti-Racism Network, which is the fiscal sponsor for the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, is totally committed. And so we list all those activities that are coming up. Patrick O'Neill will be speaking to us on August 25th about these issues of coalitions and working together. And so those are our strategic objectives. On the other side, make the connection between no NATO and abolishing nuclear weapons. That's a strategic objective that we're linking, which is why some of the activities overlap. And so we want to get more signers on HR 2850 and try to call for a public meeting or hearing in DC, possibly a congressional hearing on ending NATO. That's something that we hope to do eventually. So that's the chart, and everyone has been sent that. So Martha, do we have your email?
Yes, and I'm a member of SARN, although I didn't get notice of this meeting. I heard about it, you know, through Lucy when she couldn't attend, and she was looking for somebody who could. You know, I can make sure you have my email again. Though,
well, drop it in the chat, because
yeah,
I would like to, and with your telephone number, and I will call you up, Martha.
Okay.
So George, where are we?
We need to talk about the webinar.
Well, this is a real sticky point because the webinar, which we had proposed for October, we already have a commitment from Wealth Canada to participate. And I'm sure through Wealth International, and the European region, we would be able to get Finland, Switzerland, and Germany. So we were thinking of this as 5 countries: the US, Canada, Finland, Switzerland,
Sweden,
and
Sweden, Sweden.
Sweden. I'm sorry, I always Sweden
That's
and Germany. So the question is, do we want to try to advance a webinar in October? So Nancy, you said you thought you knew people in the European countries.
Well, I do have some contacts in Finland and Sweden. And of course, you all know Heidi Meinzold in Germany, but there are some other folks in Germany, Wilf as well. It might be helpful if you reached out to the Secretariat and asked who they might suggest. It might be good to have somebody from Africa, because NATO is very much now going into Africa. I was researching around. I was researching around and found that Mongolia has been connected to NATO since 2005. Would you have even expected that? So I think maybe somebody, the new president or somebody else, Edwick, who might be able to speak to the problem of no to NATO in Africa, along with AFRICOM, might be a very good addition.
Jenny Allen, who is basically the manager of the International Secretariat, she's on annual leave until September 12th. And so she is the go-to person. We went to her for the Palestine and Lebanon webinar. So she directed the MENA staff people at the International Secretariat to help us pull the webinar together. The one thing that I've learned over this past year building to the Congress and during the Congress is that the International Secretariat is where the organizational power is. And I do have a very close connection with them, having communicated with them through the Congress around our workshop. So I will get up with Patricia, as well as I've already sent an email to Jenny, and that's how I found out she was on annual leave until September 12th. But we know that Tamar is standing by. So if we can find out the other possibilities on our own, because I was thinking we would focus in on countries that were actually members of NATO, so that we would have a situation. I agree with you on the Africa connection if we can make it, but let's see how many folks we can get as speakers, because like we have 5 speakers for the Palestine and Lebanon webinar, which will take up almost an hour, and so that's what we have to think about for a 90-minute webinar, which would be using the Wilf International Zoom account, because that's what I've learned that we can do. And so go ahead, Nancy.
I just wanted to add that I'm a member of the International Environmental Working Group, which Tamara is now helping to co-chair. And Katrin Geyer is who's also connected to reaching critical will. I could reach out to her because she did give me some very good advice on the work on the workshop that I put together. She helped me. Anyway, she and I worked on that. So I could reach out to her, if you would like.
Well, I think that would be great, because we all need to use our contacts. My contacts are primarily with the International Secretariat. But if you could, based on your relationship with the, what's it called, the International?
It's the Environmental Working Group of International. It's, they've had that working group for a long time. It kind of has gone through ups and downs, but now it's really a strong coalition of international members from different sections. Katrin Geyer, I believe, works at the Secretariat, although she lives in London, and she was the main organizer of the several working groups of the workshops, excuse me, of the Congress. And she put one on the Environmental Working Group, put one on the July 18th. It was a spectacular workshop, and she's very knowledgeable about, I think, who's in sections and who could speak. Anyway, I could reach out to her. I could CC you and George and ask her this question.
Well, because the question is looking for speakers to speak in a webinar, because Tamara has already confirmed, and I've heard her speak several times on the topic, so I know she will do well. But the other folks in the other countries, Finland, Germany, and Sweden, and I could, we've invited Sylvie to come to the BLC meeting in late September, because I understand the International Board is actually going to be meeting for the first time in October. And so we really need to find out, we have quite a few contacts in Africa sections, so we could get up with Marie-Claire Ferre and others to find out how the Africa piece could be worked in. If you could handle the European sections, Nancy, that would be great, because at some point, I would appreciate it if today we could decide on several dates to offer, so that they don't conflict with a lot of stuff that's going on in October, because diffuse nuclear war has a lot of stuff going on in the middle of October. So we want to avoid that. So I think we're really looking at late October. Go ahead, Robin, and then Nancy.
Yeah, I wonder, did we actually vote on the title, No to NATO or No NATO? Because it seemed as though 2 people out of 6 did not seem to like it. And the 2 of you, of course, did. So the other 2 people, I don't know whether this is a quorum, how we decide things.
Well, we decide things by consensus, and the wording is not that important. I know that there is a tendency to be quite divisive in voting on things in will, and we would like to avoid that. My explanation of this working group as a working group that basically goes out of business at the end of December of 2024. So we can revisit this conversation, but right now we need to decide, number one, if we're gonna work together. It sounds like Nancy, you and Robin are interested in working together, and Martha, and I know the rest of us are interested in working together. So right now, if we could focus in on the work rather than the name, which for me is not that important. So is that your only question, Robin? Robin, is that your only question about the name of this working group?
Well, you're saying we'll go along with the name you've chosen. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we can revisit it at the next meeting because it's not that important. What's important is the work that we're doing.
Yeah, well, I guess I will talk, talk to people in my branch as to whether they're interested in participating in this and then, and I'll distinguish that it's not a part of disarm and they know I'm in disarm and they will be having questions and I'm not sure I can answer. I mean, the racism, to try to explain to them that 2 years ago, Ellen Thomas called you a racist, and that's is, you know, I'm just thrown back in terms of sort of the obstacles that are seem to be put in the way to make something work smoothly. NATO, no to NATO should be part of disarm. And in that sense, I agree with Nancy that it can be a committee, working group, whatever you want to call it, that has nothing to do and doesn't need to talk to Ellen or Cheryl at any point. We would be a separate working group.
That's not possible, Robin, for us to be a separate working group inside of disarm, not talking to Ellen and Cheryl. That is just not proper. They are the co-chairs of disarm, and George and I said we were sick of them and we walked away from disarm, but we didn't walk away from the work. My suggestion to Cheryl, Robin, is to establish a no to NATO project inside of disarm with its own goals and whatever, because our goals are very clear. And we're gonna move them forward for the branches who want to be involved. It's a case of respecting self-determination. So you get to determine with the Burlington branch whether or not you want to be a part of this 30-month project. It's as simple as that. So I would suggest you do that because it would be nice if you could continue participating, but if you are uncomfortable with it, please don't be uncomfortable.
Okay. And I see Gloria has come in and it's actually 1 hour is up.
Yeah, Gloria, that's ridiculous that you're so late. So we can talk later. George is recording this, right? So this could be shared with.
I had it down as 10. It's at 10. Oh, it was 9. You're right. Sorry.
Well, Nancy, we need to end the meeting soon.
Yeah,
and we need to talk about when our next meeting is and the announcement. So what do you have, Nancy?
So I just wanted to say that the Environmental Working Group and Katrin Geyer are very involved in organizing the delegation to COP27, and COP27 begins early November. So if we could get if we could discuss, or you could send me a private communication about dates for this webinar, I think a little earlier toward the middle of October might be better, because getting, she's very preoccupied with getting this WILF delegation put together. And we have one person going from Earth Democracy in the WILF delegation to COP27. So the sooner we can sort of fix on a couple of dates around the other webinars that you know about, the better it would be, I think.
Well, we need to decide that today. So if people don't are okay with going a few minutes over the 1 hour, because I do know that diffuse nuclear war has some actions around this the week of the 10th of October. And I have a lot of flexibility in the week before that. And I think that we can pull it together for early October. So I'm okay with doing it on the 3rd, the 4th, or the 6th of October. I have quite a bit of stuff on the 5th of October, but I would prefer to do it on the 3rd or the 6th of October. So could everyone look at their calendars and see if the 3rd or the 6th of October, because this will give me something to talk with Will International about in terms of the use of their Zoom account. And that way, when you talk to the speakers, Nancy, you can let them know that we're looking at possibly Monday, the 3rd, or Thursday, the 6th, but that we're flexible for pretty much any dates during that week, since you're proposing that we do it earlier.
What about that week of the 13th, 14th, or 17th, 18th?
Well, like I said, diffused nuclear war has lots of events around the 13th and 14th, so we should avoid that. And I'm not sure, they seem to have had something around the 11th and the 12th as well, but I haven't heard of anybody having anything around the week of the 17th, and I'm completely open that week. As it stands now, so you want to look at the week of the 17th, that won't be putting too much pressure on the COP group.
I think that might be a good week. I could suggest those earlier dates and then the 17th, 18th, maybe.
Well, let's go with the week of the 17th, because the more time we can have, the better.
I think so. And also Veterans Day is the 12th, isn't it? The 12th, 11th, 12th. And I think there's just a whole lot of events, Veterans for Peace and all sorts of people organize around those 2 dates or those 3 dates.
November, isn't it?
Well, no.
November?
Yeah. Veterans Day is November 11th.
Oh, yes, you're right. Sorry.
But Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day is October 10th.
Yeah.
So
That's
if we
right.
could avoid that week, that would be great. So
Yeah.
let's look at the week of the 17th.
Okay.
Okay, I'd just like to say I'm available anytime, but I have to get off now. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Robin. So for the week of the 17th is the week we're looking at. So when you talk to the potential speakers, Nancy, you let them know we're looking at the week of the 17th and as well as Tamara, since she's already committed. So make sure she has no conflicts because we want to avoid conflicts with the speakers.
Well, I'm going to email Tamara and see who she knows and who she might suggest as well.
Wonderful. So I think we have a plan that we're going to go forward with a No NATO webinar, and we're looking at the week of October 17th. And so in terms of the next time we get together, I think we should look at September, and my preference would be after September 13th, because that's the Palestine and Lebanon webinar. So can we pick a meeting date after the 13th? International Peace Day is the 21st, and I'm speaking at a university. And so my preference would be to do it on either the 22nd or the 26th. My preference actually is for the 26th of September because I'll be back home by then. So that's a Monday. How does that look for your schedule, Martha?
It looks fine.
So Monday, the 26th.
I can do that date.
Okay. Julian said she was having some audio problems. So Gloria.
No, the 26th is fine.
Okay, what about you, Gloria?
I
Monday
can
the
do it.
26th.
Yeah. What time?
Well, Nancy, will you still be on the East Coast?
I'll be on the East Coast, yeah.
So Gloria, do you have a preference for time since you got confused about this time?
No, I just looked at the wrong date when I looked at it too fast. Okay, no, that day looks open.
Well, let's plan on noon, because I
Noon
rarely,
Eastern?
noon Eastern, which would be 9 a.m. your time, I believe,
Okay.
Gloria.
Yes,
Because you're on the same time as Pacific time.
correct.
So let's do 9 a.m. Pacific and noon Eastern on the 26th. And we'll see where we are in terms of the speakers, because hopefully we'll be able to nail everything down on the 26th. And then we can start promoting, because it'll give us a little less than a month to promote it. And George, would you please drop the registration link to the Palestine and Lebanon webinar in the chat, since we won't be getting back together
Yeah.
before September 13th.
Oh, yeah, please finish.
Sure
Okay.
will. It'll take me about 30 seconds to find it and put it in there, but I'll do it.
So Martha, you're aware of the Palestine and Lebanon, What is to be Done webinar, which is going to take place at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday, September 13th.
No, I don't have that information at this point.
Well,
Okay, notice the screen. This is the beautiful flyer. And I'm gonna get the registration link for y'all now. Here's the registration. I'm gonna copy it and paste it into the chat.
so the webinar will be done in English and Arabic interpretation. So this is being handled by the Middle East, North Africa region staff for the Wolf International. So we're hoping to get hundreds of people in the webinar, because I know there's high interest in Palestine and Lebanon and throughout the US in terms of groups. So this is something that was organized by the Black Liberation Caucus in our commitment to solidarity with Palestine. So the whole world will know that there's a Black Liberation Caucus on September 13th. And so there are probably going to be questions about why it's not recognized by the US section. But that's something that people have to deal with going forward, because this problem of refusing recognition for the BLC is not going to go away. So that's all we have, and we're almost 15 minutes past the hour. So is there anything else that anyone else would like to add to our meeting? I think it was productive, and we do have a plan to go forward, if I understand correctly. So we're all set. So George, if you would save the video and make sure that everyone who is listed as part of the group, which now is 11 people with Martha. So we have Julianne, Lucy, and Martha from the DMV branch, you and I from the branches in the South, and then we have all the other folks, which no one else has said they're quitting yet. So everybody should get the video.
Great.
So
All right.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, George.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.